Starborn Café by Miss Yuki 1990. Chapter 13. Worthy Opponents. Warning, this chapter contains adult content. I have recorded that section separate for members. Hadaven sighed and looked at the sky. It was a cold winter day, and he was in front of the cafe cleaning up the snow. It wasn't a day to go out at all, and he doubted anyone would come to the cafe. He smiled a bit and continued shoveling the snow. Well, no one but Thor, that is. The god of thunder hardly missed a day in visiting Hadaven. He would come either in the morning or late in the evening, and the two would simply talk or watch a movie, enjoying each other's company. It has already been a month since Thor came back to Earth, and Hadaven had to admit that he was slowly getting restless. Things were going too good to last for much longer that way. When he thought about it, his life was pretty calm for the past 7 years. Either Destiny decided she has had enough of bad things happening to him and she decided to finally grant him the peace he has always yearned for, or something really, really bad is going to happen soon. Hadaven stopped and shook his head. "You're getting paranoid again," he told himself. "Nothing bad is going to happen." He nodded sharply and finished shoveling the snow. He went back into the cafe and took his cloak and mittens off. "You've taken a while, Hadaven," Erd greeted him, her invisible form perched on top of a bar stool, and Hadaven laughed quietly and walked over to the bar to make himself some tea. "A lot of snow has fallen, Erd. It's quite beautiful outside." He spoke aloud, certain that no one would hear him. "And quite cold," Erd commented. "No one will come today for sure." Hadaven hummed lowly and took a sip of his tea. "Maybe I should pay Thor a visit for a change then," he murmured into his chin. "Why not? I am certain that he will be overjoyed." "Well then, I think I might just go." Hadaven quickly finished his tea and washed the cup. "After all, Mr. Stark still doesn't know Thor was courting me, and Natasha did say she would like to be there to see his reaction." Erd laughed, and a warm wind ruffled Hadaven's clothes and hair. "Go then, before the snow starts falling again." "No need to be pushy," then drawled dryly, although he could hide his excitement from Erd. "Go!" He laughed, and with a shimmer of magic, instead of the usual black turtleneck and black pants he wore, he was dressed in faded jeans, a white turtleneck with an emerald green pullover that was at least 2 sizes bigger, and hung over his right shoulder. His hair was free of any bounds and danced around his lithe form in straight velvety strands. "Call me if anyone decides to come. I'll apparate over immediately," he spoke as he made his way towards the door. "Just go already. I know you're dying to see him." Hadaven laughed happily and pulled on his coat. He tugged his hair out of it, and Erd hugged him before he opened the door. "Have fun." "I will. See you later." He pushed his hands deep into the pockets of his jacket and looked at the sky again. The clouds were getting darker and thicker by the minute. It seemed another storm was coming. He bowed his head lower to try and hide from the cold wind that was slowly picking up speed. "Nothing bad is going to happen," he told himself again. "Nothing bad will happen." "We have a visitor." Tony and Bruce looked up from their computers when Jarvis announced someone entering the tower. "On screen," Tony said, and on the screen of his computer appeared the entrance hall shown from several different corners. "That's Ben!" Bruce grinned and Tony raised an eyebrow. "Wow, his hair is longer than I thought," he muttered and watched as Hadaven walked over to an elevator. "Bring him straight here, Jarvis." "As you wish, sir." Tony shut down the screens. "Who's coming?" Steve asked when he got out of the training room. "Ben decided to pay us a visit," Bruce said and took off his lab coat. "He did!" Thor followed after Steve, and Bruce and Tony exchanged a glance. They still didn't know what had the Thunder God grin like a loon every time someone even mentioned Hadaven or the Starborn Café. "Yes, he's in the elevator," Tony said. "I hope I'm not intruding." Hadaven entered the lab with a smile, and Steve whistled lowly while Thor's knees almost gave up on him. "You look amazing, Ben!" Steve said. He shot a small gaze at Thor, who was trying to find his tongue. Hadaven chuckled and took his jacket off, leaving it on the back of a chair in passing. "I don't have any guests scheduled to come today, so I decided to pay you a visit," he said, and accepted a hug for Bruce. "Glad you decided on that. We've been so busy lately that we didn't have the time to come over to the cafe." Bruce spoke apologetically, receiving an understanding smile from Hadaven. "This is actually a great opportunity for us." Tony clapped his hands and everyone looked at him in wonder. "The opportunity for what?" Clint asked as he entered the lab, followed by Natasha, and Adavan smirked. He had his doubts about the two agents. He wasn't one to mix in, but he knew what he would serve the two of them the next time they visited Starborn Café.
I was hoping I'd get the chance to study magic at work,
Tony confessed and gave Adavan a small puppy dog look, making Adavan sigh. And here I was hoping for a visit including tea and biscuits, he mourned, and Tony gave him a pleading look while the others laughed. Sure, why not? Then relented and Tony grinned.
Great!
Adavan chuckled to shake his head. Tony reminded him so much of Hermione that it was almost painful. He shook his head before anyone, mainly Thor, noticed his pain and smiled at Tony. What did you have in mind?
I was thinking that the best way for me to study some magic is in combat.
Adavan raised an eyebrow at Tony. You did read my file, didn't you?
He drawled, and Tony rolled his eyes. Of course I did. That's why I said that.
Adavan shrugged elegantly and nodded. Fine. Who will be my opponent?
I shall spar with you.
Thor stepped forward. Are you sure about that? I hadn't fought in a while. I might get carried away. Ren smirked, and while Steve, Natasha, and Clint exchanged knowing glances, Tony and Bruce exchanged confused stares.
I'm counting on that. I haven't had a chance to measure my strength against a worthy opponent in a while,
Thor drawled, straightening to his full height and crossing massive arms over his chest. Then I hope I'll prove to be a worthy opponent for you. Donovan spoke, smirking at that challengingly, and the left corner of Thor's lips tilted up.
I am certain you will.
Thor spoke lowly, and everyone was surprised when Donovan smirked in a way that made him look slightly dark and dangerous. His clothes shifted into the black uniform he wore in the picture they saw in his file, and his hair gathered all on its own into a long, thick braid. Well then, when do we start?
I don't think this is a good idea,
Bruce muttered as he shifted his weight nervously. They stood by the wall in the training room behind a shield Adavan conjured. He said it was just in case.
What could go wrong, Reed? Tony said carelessly. This is a safe, controlled environment.
The others raised eyebrows at him. Yes, the most powerful wizard in the world and the god of thunder are about to see who's stronger, Clint muttered. I can't see what could possibly go wrong. Tony smirked at Clint, and they looked at Adavan and Thor, who were standing in the middle of the training room. Thor had his usual armor on, minus the cape, and he spun Mjolnir in his hand expertly.
Should I go easy on you?
Thor teased, and Adavan snorted. An intricately designed wand appeared in his hand, and he raised it almost lazily. Only if you want me to go easy on you, Adavan answered, taking a stance similar to that of a professional fencer, but unlike them, the hand not holding the wand wasn't fisted on his waist, but bent and leveled with his neck.
Ready when you are,
Tony called over to them, and the two smirked at each other. May the best wizard win, Adavan hissed, and Thor charged at him. The Avengers could only stare and gape. There were moments when they didn't even know what happened. Adavan looked like he was dancing. He moved with an elegance and grace they have never seen in battle, not even Natasha. Thor's attacks seemed to simply bounce off of him. Even if Thor managed to get close enough to land a hit, Adavan would merely turn into something that resembled black sand and disappear, only to appear slightly behind Thor. If you want to hit me, you have to catch me first, Adavan challenged, and the Avengers behind the shield raised an eyebrow in wonder. They have never seen this side of Adavan, and they believe that this was the man that Adavan was before Starborn Café, before something happened that made him resign and become the man that he is today. His eyes were darker, and his expression was cold most of the time. He was precise and calculating. Every time he'd flick or snap his wand, Thor would either be forced to jump to the side or raise Mjolnir to protect himself, and even then he was pushed back a few feet.
You are powerful, then!
Thor called out when he got a moment to breathe.
I salute you!
Adavan chuckled, and the wand disappeared. His stance changed, and their public held their breaths. Come, my lord. It's time I showed you just how powerful I really am. Adavan spoke, and Thor grinned.
My pleasure!
Thor spun Mjolnir in his hand and hit the ground with it.
Now it's becoming interesting,
Tony muttered, and the others looked at him incredulously. They looked back at the two men locked in a fight when lightning rained down on Adavan, and the wizard smirked. He crossed his arms above his head, and an emerald shield appeared above him.
Caught you!
Thor swung Mjolnir towards Hadoven's ribs, and Ven's stance shifted in a second. He shielded his side with his right arm, and with his left hand raised a shield between Mjolnir and himself. Mjolnir met the shield, and Hadoven skidded to the side. "Let's make this a bit more physical," he muttered lowly, and Thor's eyes widened when the shield disappeared, and Hadoven grabbed the hammer. He used it as leverage and delivered a hit to Thor's head with his legs. Ven crouched a bit away from Thor, who rubbed his cheek with his hand and grinned wildly.
My pleasure!
Mjolnir met the ground and the floor cracked. The rest of the Avengers gaped again when Hadoven fisted his hands, and lightning seemed to crack around his fists. "Let's finish this," Hadoven charged at Thor head on. "Damn!" Clint muttered. "I'd hate to face him in a real fight."
I agree. In a way, I can see what has Fury so pissed,
Natasha added. "He's a power to be reckoned with," Steve said, and Bruce nodded. "I'd say all of us together wouldn't be able to bring him down," Bruce commented, and winced when Thor tried a round kick with his leg, only for Hadoven to grab it and jump over it. "Be it magic or hand-to-hand combat, he perfected the art of battle," Tony analyzed. "Makes you wonder exactly what kind of opponents he's used to fighting."
He's fast, agile, and obviously used to using his lithe build to deal a deadly attack. I'd even go so far and call him a one-man army,
Natasha added, and Clint nodded. Hadoven almost felt like laughing. It's been so long since he could just let go and fight. If he were to be perfectly honest, he missed this. He missed the thrill of sparring with someone he didn't have to worry about hurting. Thor was his perfect partner in everything, it seemed. He ducked when Thor swung his fist at his head. Thor cursed when Hadoven smirked at him from below his arm. He realized too late that his stronger build didn't allow him to move quickly enough. All of a sudden, he found himself on his back with Hadoven smirking at him from above. Thor looked at Hadoven's right hand and raised an eyebrow when he realized Hadoven's nails were longer and sharper, and that the Ravenair man just beat him, stopping before he landed the deadly hit. Thor wasn't sure he would survive Hadoven stabbing him with those sharp-looking nails, especially since they were aimed at his heart. "Do you surrender?" Hadoven drawled, lips tilted into a sly grin. Thor smirked.
This time.
"That's quite homoerotic," Tony muttered, only to gape when Hadoven laughed and bent out to kiss Thor soundly on his lips. "What the?" Bruce breathed out and Tony's mouth snapped shut. "Am I seeing things?" he blurted out when Thor placed his hands on Hadoven's hips and squeezed. "Only if I'm seeing things as well," Bruce spoke in utter amazement, and Steve, Natasha, and Clint laughed at the two. "You know about this!" Tony cried out. "For a month!" Steve pressed out between chuckles. "They look good together, don't they?" Natasha asked, and everyone looked at the two men. Hadoven stood up and offered his hand to Thor with a smirk on his beautiful face. Thor chuckled and accepted Hadoven's hand. Once he was standing, he pulled Hadoven into a possessive, dominating kiss, and Hadoven moaned in pleasure. "I guess that answers the question of who tops," Tony muttered, still trying to wrap his mind around the idea. "I need a shower." They looked at Hadoven and realized the shield was gone and that the two fighters hand walked over to them. "I hadn't had a fight like this in ages." Hadoven spoke as he fanned himself with his right hand. "I must admit that I feel good."
You're welcome.
Thor smirked, and Hadoven slapped Thor's chest with a teasing coarse smirk. "I'm quite surprised," Steve said. "Are you sure you don't want to join the team?" he asked with a sheepish grin, and Hadoven laughed. "I'm sure," he sighed. "I could go for that tea right now." He winced when he looked around and saw the damage his and Thor's fights did to the training room. "Seems Tony and I will have a lot of work to do," Bruce mourned, and Hadoven shot him an apologizing look. "I'll fix it right away." "You don't?" Bruce gaped together with everyone else when a wave of magic pulsated from Hadoven and a ripple spread through the training room. Once it was gone, the training room was back to the way it was before Hadoven and Thor fought. "Move in with us." Hadoven laughed at Tony, and the Avengers rolled their eyes at their comrade.
This was very satisfying,
Thor said and flexed his shoulders. Hadoven looked at him and shivered. Thor saw Ven's eyes darken and smirked at him, earning a snort from the bartender when he stood taller and crossed Strom's arms over a massive chest. "I agree. I just might come again," Hadoven drawled dryly. "You're welcome to come anytime," Bruce said, and Hadoven smiled at him. "Thank you, Bruce.
Honestly, if I knew I would feel so much better after a good spar, I would have found someone for sparring a long time ago. It felt good to let go of that control I constantly have on my magic, although I was focusing more of it on the shield than on the actual fight.
Everyone, even Thor, gaped at that.
What?
Hanavan asked with a keen expression of confusion. You mean to tell me that you would be even more powerful if you weren't focusing on the shield around us? Steve asked weakly, and Hanavan tilted his head to the side slightly.
I wasn't using half of what I have in my arsenal, Steve, he admitted. I'm a master of dark arts, and I'm not allowed to use those in friendly sparring. I didn't want to actually hurt Thor. Thor wasn't using his full power either.
Hanavan glared at Thor, who rubbed the back of his head with a small, sheepish smile.
I am at fault,
he admitted, and Hanavan shook his head with a smile full of fondness decorating his face.
Let's go. I could really go for that cup of tea.
I'll prepare one while you and Thor take a shower,
Bruce offered, and Hanavan shot him a thankful smile. Come, you can take a shower in my rooms,
Thor said, and Hanavan nodded gratefully. Only a shower, kiddies. Don't make me knock on your door, Tony called out after Hanavan and Thor made their way out.
Really, Stark? Clint murmured. I think they're old enough to take care of themselves,
Natasha added, while Steve and Bruce only shook their heads. What? Tony asked innocently. You never heard of matrimonial purity? Everyone rolled their eyes. I don't think they've been pure in ages, Tony,
Bruce drawled, and they made their way out of the turning room.
You never know. Maybe they've been saving themselves for someone special. Tony, Steve said. What? Stop talking. I got Captain.
Hanavan sighed as he stepped under the spray of warm water.
He felt good. He felt very good.
For once, his magic was fluctuating calmly through his veins.
Merlin knows how much he needed to just let go.
He shivered and smiled when a pair of
Strong, warm arms wrapped themselves around his waist and a loving kiss was placed on his shoulder.
Are you bothered by this?
Thor asked and placed a few more kisses along the curve of Hanavan's neck. Hanavan sighed and shivered against him.
No!
Thor smirked, and Hanavan's eyes closed as he leaned back against Thor. He smirked when he felt Thor's knee against his back. Hanavan was no blushing virgin, and he knew Thor wasn't one either. Damn it, he was 43 years old, and Thor was centuries older than he was. It would be foolish to expect that either one of them never enjoyed the pleasure of another's touch. All that mattered was that they had finally found each other, and Hanavan would make damn sure that nothing and no one got between the two of them. He moaned when Thor dragged his big warm hands up and down Hanavan's sides. He settled his hands on Hanavan's shoulders and rubbed small circles with his thumbs there, making Hanavan groan deep in his throat. You took long enough, Tony grumbled when Thor and Hanavan walked into the living room with Thor's arm wrapped possessively around Hanavan's waist. The two smirked at him while the others rolled their eyes. Tony, Bruce muttered. What? Tony whined. Thor and Hanavan laughed, and Thor kissed Hanavan's temple lovingly. Hanavan looked around and frowned when he looked out the window. The storm outside was raging on, and Hanavan felt that bad feeling return in full swing.
Is something wrong?
Natasha asked when Hanavan walked over to the window with Thor trailing after his lover. He stopped behind Hanavan and placed his hands on slightly hunched shoulders.
What is it, then?
Asked the Norse god, and Hanavan crossed his arms over his chest, placing his hands over Thor's. Thor entwined their fingers together, and Hanavan leaned back against him.
I do not know, Hanavan murmured. I've had a bad feeling ever since this morning.
The others exchanged worried glances while Thor frowned and looked outside the window.
This storm looks familiar, Hanavan whispered. Too familiar.
Thor nodded, and the others stood up. In that moment, a long beam of light hit the ground in the distance, and everyone's eyes widened.
Merlin, no,
Hanavan whispered. Someone has arrived.